Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Imtiaz Hussain. I'm the host and moderator for today's panel. We have like real, great panel today with all the panelists from different parts of the world, having some real good success against their names. And so I think I would like to start off talking about what the panel is all about, right? I mean, the panel itself calls out the importance of IP collaborations onto the mobile games. And it's an interesting piece and very, historically people have been doing now, it seems to be very evident. So I think for us as audience, for us as someone who has been part of mobile gaming industry, it's important to know how this is changing the dynamics of whole ecosystem. So to start off, I think we can start off with introductions. And I would like to have each of the panelists here to introduce themselves and possibly maybe you might like to quickly touch upon if there is a book that you're reading or a podcast that you're listening to or a blog that you follow in the gaming wise you might like to recommend to the audience here. So maybe we can start with Paulina. Do you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much for such a nice introduction. So, hi everyone, my name is Polina. I am PR marketing and manager at Aptica. Aptica is an ad intelligence and app analytics tool which collects data from more than 11 million of apps. And as if we speak about the recommendation from my heart, it will be just the Aptica blog on Telegram and on our website. So you can just type aptica.com and visit this website and check our latest articles on blog. So this is just a fair recommendation from me.
Great. Hey there, Paulina. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining. Henry, do you want to, might like to give a quick intro and possibly anything that you want us to read and listen to right now?
Okay, this is Henry Lee. I'm from Tencent Games Team Studios group. I'm working on a game called Honor of Kings, which is now available globally. I would encourage you to try and check out the game. It's very good fun. As for books or podcast, I've been reading a book. It's called Everything Said is Untrue. It's by Daniel Nayeri, Iranian writer based in the United States.
Lovely.
It's a very good book. I enjoy reading it. It's all about how a boy with his family fled the country in Iran because of religious reason and became refugees in Italy and ended up as asylum seekers in the States. How he got on with schooling, school life in the United States. How actually storytelling was helping him to deal with loneliness and to start a new life
Lovely.
in a totally strange country and cultures.
Wonderful.
And it's a very good book. It's also because when we do branding or games, it's all about storytelling. It's
100%.
the power of storytelling.
Agree. Very good. Thanks so much for again. That's a book that goes into my Amazon wish list, and so I'll go and get that much for myself. And Josh and I
Yeah.
know for some time right now, and quite a veteran in the industry. Quite a respectable, professional from the gaming. So I would love to hear, Josh, for the interest of the audience, you might like to quickly introduce yourself and what you're up to, and anything that you recommend for us to read or listen to.
Yep. My name is Josh Burns. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development at FunPlus. FunPlus is a cross-platform game publisher, historically known for the games in the strategy category. So you have three main titles: State of Survival, King of Avalon, and Guns of Glory. Yeah, I'm based in the United States. And in terms of recommendation, I'll go less intellectual, but for industry stuff, I love the Super Juiced newsletter, and also Deconstructor Fun newsletter are great ones for some pretty deep like industry discussions and insight.
So great. That is that's something I follow through. The kind of content that comes in is really infuses a lot of thoughts, and it builds a new perspective of how you look at games. So thanks so much for recommendations, guys. I think we can get going in terms of the actual discussion that we are here for, which is the cross promotion of or the collaboration with the IPs, and which has its own following, and the question comes in very. I think to start off, I would say that, hey, there are multiple options for an IP owner to, promote their IPs, right? And, they can go to TV shows, or they can go to some other methods of advertising and so on. But how is mobile game is uniquely positioned? How do you see that? And why is that important into their overall strategy of, having that, offered to their audiences and their fan base? So, Polina, do you want to go first, and then maybe Henry and Josh?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Actually, talking numbers, in the first half of 2024, the gaming vertical generated more than 30 billion of downloads, and there are billions of players all around the world. So it's a perfect platform for brands to boost their brand awareness. And now there are a lot of different ways for integration, for advertising, for example, in-game ad, native banners, some integrations into gameplay with some playables. And I want to solely focus on one example. It happened to Pokemon Go mobile game in 2023. And it was an experience of using rewarded AR playables inside of a game. So when user played this Pokemon Go mobile game, it could see a real world experience advertising. It was a collaboration with convenience retailer Circle K, and this user could grab a coffee in this augmented reality. And one more case is about Monopoly Go that topped about 400 million of dollars in the first half of 2024. This app and all the apps, like not all the, but most of the apps in this IP sector, they are using some hybrid types of advertising now, and solely Monopoly Go is using some playables with interstitials, some native banners, and video, all in all together. So these speak for themselves that this is a very prosperous sphere for brand promotion and advertising.
Lovely. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting how the landscape has been changed. I remember back in the days, people used to look at this as more of a marketing strategy for having a brand on top of the game, but now it looks like there is a revenue stream too. So Henry, I mean, you have been working with a lot of brands as well. Would love to hear how mobile stands out. Right? I mean, there are multiple options that IP owner has, but how mobile stands out, and why do you think that?
I think yes, I think one of the because Polina has given us a lot of data about the industry and why and how branding collaboration with mobile games is picking up very fast. I mean, from a personal experience point of view, I think mobile games is very immersive experience for most of the users, and it happens on a mobile phone, which is very personal for a lot of people. They bring the mobile phone everywhere they go usually. So I do think that mobile and mobile games are for a lot of people, especially young generation, they are replacing other forms of entertainment and they watch television on mobile, they watch drama with mobile games, they play mobile games with their friends, and they play mobile games in everywhere they go, in the bedroom, and when sometimes they when they get 5 minutes, even in the bathroom, they would.
I know.
Just
Yeah. So I mean that's interesting, and I mean uh, mobile is replacing how people consume entertainment. They are replacing all the other forms of methods of consuming entertainment. So that on that note, Josh, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other points I'll make is that we kind of take for granted in gaming is it is global. So if you think about like a TV shows, movies, it's becoming more global, but it's still very like geographically fragmented. So I think the interesting thing for like IPs, non-gaming IPs, is you're able to reach like a truly global audience and expand the interest in your show or movie IP. I think also games have like a much deeper engagement than we talked a little about immersive aspect of gaming versus a show. And I think the other one is like the kind of ongoing content, especially for like a live service game. Obviously like a TV show or movie has like it's a limited amount of content, whereas a game, can basically persists forever. So, I think that ties into like a Netflix entering gaming is that they have a lot of these popular show franchises, like these, especially a lot of the like a reality TV stuff, and they're building games around it because you can continue to play the game while maybe the new season of the show is going. And I think from the collaboration side, meaning bringing an entertainment IP into an already existing game, is you have like for the IP holder, you have like a deep already built-in audience that exists. Like when we bring IPs into state of survival, we have a huge DAU scale. So that's attractive for them because it's less risky than making a brand new game.
That's a very interesting point you mentioned, right? You have TV shows, you have movies, you have one-time view, and then you're done. But the replayability on mobile is higher, and it is important for users or for the IP owners also to have the IP on face of the user all the time, right? And replayability of the game, especially with the mobile, actually gives that opportunity for the user. So that's interesting. Well, you come from a marketing background, and one of the biggest challenge in this part of the, and especially in the mobile industry, mobile gaming industry, is the user acquisition, right? And I've done. Now ourselves, we as a studio have partnered with a lot of IPs in the past, and we went with an ideology that, hey, what, this is going to help us in the marketing aspects of it. But I would love to hear from you. Is that still stands true? I mean, this is something we have done like a few years back, but is it still stands true for having an IP which will get you users at a very good cost, or I mean, reasonably cheaper than other user base? So, do you have any thought process on that?
Sorry, was that for me?
No, that's for Polina.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so speaking about this marketing issues, and by the way, I'm really sorry for the sound. My dog is also wants to participate in our conference, so she's been a little bit loud. Speaking from this marketing perspective, and especially this revenues and downloads, all of these digits, actually now the trends what we see in this market, we can see that there are a lot of IP games in Google Play and App Store. And by the way, if we speak about numbers specifically, there are 2,479 apps in on Android, and a little bit bigger amount is on iOS. And if we differentiate this IP origin apps by some sections, by some verticals, the top 3 categories are anime, for example, Naruto, Dragon Ball Legends, and some similar apps. This is the top numbered app category in this IP sector. The next category is animated series, some cartoons, for example, some apps and games with SpongeBob, Peppa Pig, My Little Pony, and other similar games. And the third category with a little bit more than 200 of apps in both office stores are brand and product collaborations. So, for example, some collaborations of brands for kids like Hello Kitty, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Lego, and etc. And all in all, there is enhancing gameplay that these collaborations bring to real life, and IP integration here can be a great help for building the community around the game. So when games have some strong IPs, this often drives users to create content, some UGC, participate in discussions, generate organic buzz, and this helps a lot to secure the retention and engagement rates. So also speaking about the revenues, as I've already mentioned, the case of Monopoly Go that had a revenue for about not two, but $400 million in the first half of 2024.
Absolutely. I mean, Monopoly Go is the latest poster boy for mobile gaming industry, so we get that, and that actually, I think your dog wants to be an IP by itself, so that's the reason he's like, you want to be contribute. Yes. I want to contribute, kind of thing. But going back, Henry and Josh, you guys have been working with brands, and you have seen a decent amount of success with that. But if someone here wants to or plan for going after licensing out an IP for their potential game, what are the parameters someone has to look at, right? What are the factors someone has to look at? Hey, this is the reason I want to choose this particular app. And that. So can you call out those and point out things that would help the audience here? Josh, you might like to go first. Or?
Yeah, sure. So I think really quickly on the UA topic, and I think we're in a very competitive category. We have our first 2 fully licensed games coming out, fully licensed based on IPs. And I think if you getting down to the details, basically what we see is like a much higher click-through rate, as well as like conversion rate, meaning like people actually downloading the app versus like original games in our category. So I think when it gets down to the details, that's where you see significant differences when we're advertising our own original game versus our upcoming DC Comics strategy game. Yeah, so in terms of evaluating potential partnership, I think it's important to understand like what your goal is. If for us, a lot of our games are older, so we're looking to basically maintain and sustain interest in our current audience. So we do a lot of player research. So we'll ask our players around awareness of different IPs, interests in level, and as well as like level of interest in specific IPs. For State of Survival, we've had probably like 5 or 6 IPs, from Walking Dead to the Joker, Resident Evil, Pacific Rim, bringing them into our game. So that's really the strategy that we're taking. I mean, this is content players can both increases in engagement as well as like monetization. So we want people to not only be interested in engaging with the IP related collaboration content, but also willing to spend money to unlock it and utilize it in game. So that's kind of our methodology. I mean, I think There's other factors you got to look at is like availability. Some IPs don't do like in-game collaborations versus like only doing full game licenses. Sometimes the rights for an IP are with different companies and for different regions of the world. And for us and everyone who wants to have like global rights, then it becomes very complicated. And then you also have to know like what else is going on with the IP. Like if I'm in the match 3 category and I want to bring an IP into my match 3 game, but there's a fully licensed match 3 game in the market for that IP, that's probably means they're not going to be interested in working with you. So those are just a few things top of mind that we think about.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense because sometimes the IP mismatch may not be a good idea for a game, right? And we tried with one of our games, so I understand that. So, Henry, what is your opinion on that?
Yes, I actually agree with Josh. You have to match. You also we have to understand our users in a particular market. For example, for our games, mobile game, usually mobile game players like anime and manga, but not in our market. So usually, if we collaborate with anime and manga IPs, it should work well in most of the regions, but not in all of them. For example, some of the in Brazil or in Southeast Asia, most of the users would love that, but not possibly in some parts of Turkey or in the Middle East. It might work slightly differently. And also, when we try to bring in a brand in our game, we have to make sure that we are ready, because for example, when we say, okay, these IPs must be really, really welcome by our users in our game, but are we ready? Do we have the creative assets ready to welcome the new users coming in the game? Are we able to retain them after the epic collaboration is over? Otherwise, it's just a one-off thing. We take in a lot of users, but we don't have sort of successive assets and events to make sure that the new users that we bring in because of the epic collaboration will be able to be retained.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Great. Andy, that's all valid points. Both Josh and Andy. And if I may ask this question to all of you, in fact, Andy, you can start off talking about this. So, when the IP comes in and when you try to integrate, you took the license from any of the IPs, and there would be a lot of control by the IP owners in terms of your creativity, right? And then there is the commercial success that someone has to look at, right? And so how do you balance that, right? And because a lot of brands, like suppose I partner with the likes of Adidas, and they might position, hey, you know what, we don't want the shoe to look like this in the game, and so on. While there could be a very good commercial reasons for us to put the shoe in that way. Right. So how do you balance that creativity, and what are the if you have an advisor on that? Henry, you want to start with?
No, it's really hard. When we work with famous IPs, they're usually very rigid about what you are able to do.
Yeah.
And for us, sometimes every piece of design, every piece of asset associated with the IP needs to be approved by the IP owner.
Right.
We try our best. We try our best to persuade them that this will work. What you proposed would not work. But sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, and we have to live with that. But usually, I think, to be honest, American IP owners, they are more sort of flexible. We can negotiate and we say, okay, let's try something new, try something different. But some of the IP owners, they are very, very, very rigid.
I
If we want to collaborate with them, we really want to bring them to our users because our users would enjoy them. Then that is the price we have to pay, I suppose.
I
Yeah.
And
agree.
it takes time. It takes time to build the trust. So if we work with some of the IP owners on a very successful case, so maybe for the second time that will be more flexible. I think, yeah.
I agree. I mean, once the trust is built, there is more liberty given to you as a, hey, you know how to do it, and you have been showing, good results in whatever the changes. So that makes sense. And Josh, this might make you a little happy. What Henry is saying that American, IP owners are a little more flexible compared to the other parts of the world. So, what is
Yeah,
your opinion? Yeah.
yeah, I would say sometimes. And I think we've only worked with less than 10 IPs, but I hear a lot, especially like an anime IP is extremely particular about every minor detail of um, of the IP. So the challenge here is like a lot of times the most appealing IPs to license are ones that are the oldest or longest existing evergreen IPs. The problem is that then there's um, probably a high correlation to them being more rigorous. So if you're doing like a Marvel or DC, those IPs have existed for a very long time.
Mhm.
So there's a ton of content out there that you have to align with um, in terms of your narrative elements and the look and what characters can do and what they can't do. So I would say the biggest correlation is like the sort of history or age of the IP is going to correlate with how rigorous um, versus like when we're working with maybe like a Pacific Rim, um, there's less sort of long term history, so I think it's a little more straightforward. But yeah, I think um, you know, uh, understanding like that in advance can be helpful because knowing like how rigorous an IP partner is going to be is going to increase your development time and like the number of revisions that you're going to have to do and basically your costs to execute the collaboration. Um, so I think that's definitely a really important thing to consider because it can be very time consuming. I think for us as a company, we are used to working extremely fast in development and
Sure.
everything we do in development. So having to have somebody review something and taking 7 to 10 business days for each cycle is a very different experience. And they asking you to the eyebrow for the character needs to point this way, not the way you have it. This kind of very detailed stuff. It can be very different experience for those who have not worked with the IP partners in that model before.
Sure, sure. I mean, that's an interesting point. Paulina, do you have any view to it, and what your thoughts are on this?
Yes, I totally agree with Henry and Josh in these terms. But as an analytical tool, we have a view on the performance of some specific apps which use some specific campaigns. And in our opinion, there are just some pieces of advice for this balance of creativity and commercial interests. So first of all, it could be a limited time event. So like Fortnite uses, for example, some crossovers with the Star Wars films or other cross collaborations. Also, there is another case of Zimat's game, which is called Magic Jigsaw Puzzles. So they collaborate with Marvel, Disney, also National Geographic, and other like universes, and they arrange some limited time events. So maybe this can balance these two concepts. And the second point is to continue to collect feedback from the community for you to be aware of the needs of your audience and to be sure that you do everything right in terms of these collaborations.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks, Paulina. And continuing with you on, and you know, I so user acquisition, right? I mean, there is, like I said a little while back, there is the biggest challenge for mobile gaming industry is how you gonna keep your user acquisition costs low, right? And uh, from from an analytics platform standpoint, what you're seeing is, are you seeing that, hey, this is a route that you would recommend for studios to see to keep your costs low, or is it a very viable option for them? What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I think, and we in Aptica think that these collaborations are for sure should be tested, and they can be successful. But you always should focus on the check whether this is a fit for your specific audience with this brand or not really. So you should check the interests of your audience. You should check that some demographics, values, strategic goals of your company and of the brand with which you want to collaborate. So you need to always focus on the preferences of the game's user base. But totally, like speaking in general, it is a very great instrument to try, a very nice tool to try. But here you need to always focus on authenticity.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say really quickly, I think on the UA side, I mentioned earlier, like the better UA metrics, especially on the front end, like click-through rate and conversion. On the other side, you have to consider is you're going to be much more limited in terms of what you can do in the ad creatives. Because remember,
yeah.
all the ad creatives are going to have to be approved by the
Right.
IP partner. So, this is a thesis we're testing. We have our first 2 fully licensed games coming out next year, so we don't actually, we have a hypothesis around this on the UA side is actually a very important part of why we, license these IPs, because they are, it is very expensive and complicated to do versus an original game. But don't overlook the constraints that you'll have in what you can create versus, with an original game, you can kind of essentially do whatever you want.
Sure, sure. Then Josh, continuing on that with you, like you did mention, hey, there is rigorous cycle of getting approvals, and because I've worked with IP owners, so I can understand. And so what, so when you're actually working with the IP owners and trying to negotiate a partnership, and this is like even signing up the IP or having the partnership begin, do you look at it to be a more like, hey, this is like one-time event, there is a movie coming out, I want to do it, or it's going to be more like, hey, I would like to look at a very long-term play. So there are IPs which have been there for long and doing, but there's a new IP coming in which would be potentially big. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is going to, what we think of FunPlus is very different than what other companies. I think if you're a smaller or mid-sized developer, you might have a different perspective. I mean, for us, we're most interested in the sort of evergreen, large-scale IPs. Those are inherently going to be the most expensive ones, but they also have a built-in audience of like highly engaged users that have like a very strong affinity for the IP, a ton of content to work with and to incorporate it, especially when we're thinking like a fully licensed game. We've my personal opinion is chasing like a new IP if it's a movie or a show or something is pretty risky. I think maybe say 8 to 10 years ago in the mobile market, it was something that could work, especially for a smaller mid-sized company, because I think Apple and Google love to feature the games aligned with like a new Pixar movie. and featuring, I think, had a much greater impact than it does these days. So and also the development time and cost of making a game was much lower. So I think that's a pretty tough and risky approach these days to build a game around a new IP. But again, coming from the Fun Plus perspective, our goal is to build games that can reach $1 billion plus lifetime revenue. So it's going to narrow the scope of what might be interesting to us. I will say we're doing something a little different with our second licensed game, which is based on the Foundation IP, which is an Apple TV Plus show, as well as a book series by Isaac Asimov. I think that one is less maybe well known than a lot of IPs, but it has a rich amount of content that exists for it, and a lot of flexibility for us to build around and create new content within the IP universe. So I wouldn't say we're only focused on the Marvel DC kind of stuff, but yeah, I think new IPs is definitely risky, and I would also say trying to time your game with the actual release of even new content for an IP is also risky, because making a game these days is very complicated, and the timing can take multiple rounds of testing and iteration. So licensing an IP and then hoping to draft off of the next movie or season of a show is I would say that's risky.
You're so right about it, right? For games, it takes significantly long time for testing and do that at the point where hey, I want to make sure that the KPIs are are in line to what I want to do, and I also want to at the same time ride on to the marketing efforts that are being done for this the new content that has been released by IP, right? So aligning that would be very difficult, especially, and getting that clearance from product team. Hey, you know what, we want to release it because the movie is releasing or the show is being launched, or and where the metrics are not so good, right? So I agree. It's tying that launch of the game with an event of launch of the content may not be may be very risky for a studio to do it. But Henry, you have been working on a lot of content for your game, and which that kind of a user base. But how how do you incorporate culturally relevant themes when it comes for localizing IPs for different regions?
Yeah. First, although we are very much established in China, we are relatively new overseas. And so the first phase of localizing IP when we go overseas is actually tell our stories in their language, so they can understand what this game is, what our stories, what the hero, that story of the heroes, the story of each skin we have. So it's more like when we are in India or in Indonesia or in the Philippines or in Brazil, we try our best to tell our story in their language, so they would be able to understand the game easier. And based on that, we try to incorporate local themes, local stories, local cultural heritage into our game. For example, in Brazil, we developed a new scheme based on their traditional arts. It's called capoeira. So we have a capoeira scheme, and the music is capoeira. And the music is composed by local artists and played by the local artist, and that is one way. Whenever we go, we try our best to do that, to do what we have done, have been doing for many years, is try to incorporate local culture, local cultural heritage into our design. And now we're in Indonesia, in the Southeast Asia, For example, we just released a new skin based on the cultural heritage of Indonesia and Malaysia. It's silat. It's a martial arts, and we try our best to get the details right. We talk to our users. We talk to the local artists, local researchers, and local staff. Try our best to get the details right. Yeah, of course. When we are in the Middle East, we have to understand the users and the culture there to make sure that their stories are represented in our game, in the game.
Cool. Yeah. So I think that's, these were the questions that, we were thinking to cover. These are the topics that we want to look at during our conversation. But there are a bunch of questions that came in from our users here. So I think Paulina, if you can start, if you like any of the questions that you want to answer from the lovely audience that come in.
Yeah, here was a question about how to select IPs that align well with your game's brand while offering something fresh for players. So, finalizing all that was said, there should be several layers for you to make sure that it will be a match. So, first of all, you should look at your financial and technical resources and consider them because you should always keep in your mind the whole information about licensing fees, royalties, costs, some technical issues, and this stuff. And the second layer is about this match in values, in the needs and some strategic goals of each brand. You also need to consider these long-term partnership results, and you have to always keep in mind that this will be a great mix of your values and maybe interests of another brand's audience.
Sure. Thanks, Antonio, for that question. And Josh, do you want to answer any? And Henry, do you want to pick up a question or so?
Yeah, let's see. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So there's one about integrating partner IP into the actual gameplay. I mean, I think for us, we definitely have a framework for our IP collaborations. So we'll basically create like different game modes and make sure that for the ones that fit around the IP, we have like a parkour game mode, this kind of thing. So I think that's something you want to take into account when you look at licensing the IP is like what IP elements do you want to leverage for your IP from the IP and how will they fit into the different game modes. I think we'll bring IP elements. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have vehicles in our game, so we figure out which IP elements can be created to craft a vehicle. We have base building elements, so we add like a different like statues, add buffs to your base into the game. So I think the cosmetic only thing is going to be more limited. It's definitely a lot easier. If you're a Fortnite, you're creating these different skins. It's like a highly repeatable, like kind of less complex, if you will. There's definitely more complexity with bringing it into the gameplay because the IP partner might not want their hero, participating in certain types of gameplay, like where maybe you could be defeated, this kind of thing. There's a lot of nuances, but I think it's definitely critical to leverage the IP and the costs that you're going to pay for it to figure out like if you can bring it into the game play elements.
Yeah, that is like very right. I mean, like I was giving an example of Adidas shoe when you are incorporating into the gameplay. It's a very product decision, right? More than commercial side of things, right? You just don't want to impact the gameplay and the love for the game by the users. Henry, did you like any? Do you like to answer any of the questions asked by?
Okay, I will just ask one question with just one example. So the question is, what are some ways to creatively integrate a partner's IP into the actual gameplay, not just cosmetics or branding? In Honor of Kings, we worked very, very well with SNK, the Japanese company. What we did is actually to integrate their characters into our game as heroes. So we have 4 heroes from SNK that are hugely popular among our users. It's been there for many years. And in the mobile game, heroes are the core of a mobile game. So when we work together with SNK, we integrate their characters as heroes in our game, which is a very, very long term, and it has been very successful. So it has to be part of the core gameplay. Otherwise, just people get used to it and they forget it. And so that is one example of integration, not just as branding or cosmetics.
I agree. Thanks. And yeah, I think that's the time that we have for today. But I think it was pretty good conversation. Especially, I do come across studios who always say that here, does it make sense for us to get an IP, and how does it work when you get an IP? How difficult it is. Back in the days, like I said, IP was seeing this as a marketing method, but now IP was looking at that as a more of a marketing gimmick, but now they actually look at this as a revenue stream. So yeah, MGs comes with it. So, but it is actually gonna give you a lot of opportunity to reduce your CPIs and have an extended gameplay with the retention as well. So thank you so much, Polina, Henry, Josh, for joining in, giving your insights and thoughts, and audience. Thank you so much for lovely questions, and hope